Have you ever felt like the world is on the brink of something monumental, something that could completely reshape the course of history? Well, imagine if there were clues scattered throughout time that told us exactly what might happen and when. That's the premise behind today's story, a story rooted in ancient prophecy, one that's been unfolding for over 1,000 years and now, in 2025, may finally reach its dramatic conclusion. I'm sure you've heard of Nostradamus, the famous seer, whose predictions have captured imaginations for centuries. But what if I told you there's another prophet, equally as remarkable, who lived more than 1,000 years ago, yet his predictions are just as chillingly accurate? His name was Zen Master Hango Xiun, a monk from the Tang dynasty in China. Unlike many mystics of his time, Hango wasn't a wandering preacher or someone seeking fame. He was a recluse, deeply devoted to meditation and the pursuit of enlightenment. It's said that he understood the universe in a way few others could, and through his intense contemplation, he wrote 14 prophetic verses. What makes these prophecies even more astonishing is that 12 of them have already come true. But here's where things get truly eerie. The last 2 verses, which specifically point to the year 2025, haven't yet played out. And when you read them, you start to wonder, did Hango foresee something earth-shattering in our future? Let's dive deeper into Hango's life and his prophecies. Unlike many religious figures, Hango wasn't just a passive observer of the world. He interacted with it in unexpected ways. One story that stands out is when he struck Emperor Xuanzong of Tang, not out of anger, but to teach him a lesson in humility and compassion. This act of defiance shocked the court, but instead of punishing Hango, the emperor showed him respect, even giving him a moniker that means the rude monk, a title that combined humor with reverence. It was this fearless approach to life that led to the emperor ordering all of Hango's teachings to be transcribed. Among those teachings were the 14 prophetic poems, a cryptic collection whose meaning would only become clear centuries later. The first signs of their truth began to appear more than 800 years after Hango's death. Every major historical event in China, from the fall of the Ming dynasty to the rise of the Qing, seemed to echo Hango's verses. The imagery in his poems was so precise that it felt like he had witnessed these events firsthand. The question then becomes, how could someone living so far in the past predict such distant events? What's even more puzzling is the prophecy that references 2025. Why would a Zen master, living in the 9th century, be concerned with a year so far beyond his time? And why does this particular year appear in the visions of mystics from various parts of the world, cultures that had no connection with one another? We're used to hearing about predictions from different cultures that seem to align, but the case of Hango's prophecy is different. His poem doesn't name any specific nation or leader, but instead speaks in more universal terms, referring to a world-changing event. One of the 2 remaining prophecies reads, "In the year of the rat, the world reels from plague. The West shall again witness the rise of one from the South. By the year of the snake, all shall return to the center." In case you didn't know, the year of the rat corresponds to 2020, the year the pandemic began. And the year of the snake, that's 2025, the year we're currently stepping into. Now, before we continue, let's take a moment to reflect. In 2020, the world was thrown into chaos with the pandemic. Cities shut down, economies faltered, and life as we knew it came to a grinding halt. For many, the world felt as though it was reeling. And here's the thing, Hango's prophecy spoke about just that, a global crisis that would shake the world. So what happens next? What does the year of the snake hold for us? The next part of Hango's prophecy speaks about the rise of a force from the south. What could this mean? Some might interpret this as a geopolitical shift, perhaps signaling the rise of nations from the global south gaining more influence. Others might see it as a cultural shift, with forgotten or marginalized voices gaining prominence on the global stage. And then there's the possibility that this is pointing to something even deeper, a spiritual or societal transformation. Whatever it means, the question remains, what happens after the world reels from the plague? Will 2025 be a year of dramatic change, Or will it be the beginning of something even greater? As we continue, let's explore the deeper meaning of these prophecies. Could Hango have been foreseeing the resurgence of a dominant power? Could this prophecy indicate a time when the world turns its focus toward the East, where ancient civilizations like China once stood at the center of global influence? Or perhaps it's something darker, a signal that we might be heading toward a major conflict, a new world war where the global balance of power will shift. In the following sections, we'll unpack these possibilities and look at the specific examples from history that seem to match Hango's predictions. Let's see if we can connect the dots between the ancient words of a monk and the events shaping our world today. Now that we've set the stage, it's time to dig into what this prophecy might actually mean for us in the coming years, especially as we approach the year 2025. How much weight can we give to these ancient predictions? And what do they suggest about the future of the world and our place in it? To start, let's take a closer look at the historical context surrounding Hango's earlier prophecies. As we mentioned before, he didn't just predict individual events, he predicted the rise and fall of entire empires. One of the most striking examples of his accuracy lies in his first prophetic poem, which references the downfall of the Ming dynasty. In this poem, Hango spoke of the disruption of the sun and moon, two celestial symbols that just so happened to represent the official emblem of the Ming dynasty. This imagery was striking, as it symbolized a kingdom in decline, and what followed this prophecy? The Ming dynasty began to unravel in the most catastrophic way. There were natural disasters, famine, corruption, and uprisings. Farmers rebelled against the ruling class, and the once proud dynasty was eaten alive from the inside. In 1644, it all came to a head when the peasant army of Li Zicheng breached the capital, Beijing. Emperor Chongzhen, the last ruler of the Ming dynasty, ended his life in a desperate act beneath an ancient tree, as though he was offering an apology to the ancestors he had failed. Incredibly, Hango's first poem seemed to predict this moment with uncanny precision. Not just the fall of the dynasty itself, but the exact imagery of chaos and tragedy. Even more fascinating, though, is how the prophecy doesn't end with the collapse of the Ming. Beneath the sorrow of the fall, Hango hinted at something larger, a cycle of rise and fall that would continue throughout history. Just as the Ming fell, so too would another empire rise. That empire, of course, was the Qing dynasty, which would go on to shape China's destiny for the next several centuries. And here's where things get even more intriguing. As China transitioned from the Ming to the Qing dynasty, many assumed the new rulers would be unable to maintain the strength of their predecessors. But then, an extraordinary emperor rose to power, Kangxi. At just 8 years old, Kangxi became the emperor, and for decades he would become the very heart of the Qing dynasty. His reign was marked by strength, political stability, and a golden age of prosperity in China. What's shocking is that Hango's second prophetic poem seems to have foreseen Kangxi's rise. Even more incredibly, it foretold the exact length of his reign, a full 61 years, as Hango's poem specified. How could a monk, living hundreds of years before Kangxi's birth, have known not only the rise of this young emperor, but the very length of his reign? This precision in the prophecy defies explanation, but Hango's foresight didn't stop with Kangxi. The next ruler, Qianlong, would continue to follow the prophecy's trajectory. Under Qianlong, the Qing dynasty reached its peak, controlling vast territories and enjoying immense prosperity. However, the prophecy also suggested that the brilliance of the Qing Empire would eventually begin to wane. This part of the prophecy was just as accurate, as the Qing dynasty's decline was swift and inevitable after Qianlong's rule. By the time Qianlong abdicated in 1795, the empire was already starting to show signs of weakness. His reign, which had seemed so prosperous, was actually a precursor to the internal strife that would tear the empire apart in the coming centuries. In fact, Hango's fourth prophetic poem seemed to predict not just Qianlong's reign, but also the eventual decline that followed. But perhaps the most sobering part of this story is how Hango's prophecies seem to echo the larger cycles of history. Empires rise, they fall, and the cycle repeats itself. There's a sense of inevitability to it all, as if history itself is moving in a predetermined path. When Hango spoke of a heavy red dragon, marking the beginning of China's modern Dark Age, he could have been referring to the late Qing period, where internal corruption, rebellions, and foreign pressures began to take a toll. This period would eventually lead to the Opium Wars, the loss of sovereignty to foreign powers, and the eventual collapse of the imperial system in China. In the next part of the prophecy, Hango wrote about how the Red Dragon would signal the beginning of a new era, an era of crisis, rebellion, and ultimately the weakening of the once mighty empire. When you look at what happened after the Qing dynasty, it's hard not to see the prophecy playing out in real time. But what's even more remarkable is that, as these prophecies continue to unfold, they seem to point toward a far greater, more global shift, one that could come to a head in the year 2025. So how does the next phase of Hango's prophecy fit into all of this? The year 2025, according to Hango, is a key turning point, one that could mark a significant shift in the global order. As we inch closer to 2025, it's impossible to ignore the potential for a profound shift in geopolitics, culture, and even the spiritual fabric of the world. What does it mean when Hango writes, "The West shall again witness the rise of one from the South"? This could refer to the geopolitical shifts we're already seeing in the world. Many have speculated that the rise of nations in the global South, such as China, India, and Brazil, could challenge the long-standing dominance of Western powers. The world is changing and the balance of power is shifting. This could be the rise that Hango predicted, a force emerging from the South to challenge the old order. And what about the idea that by the year of the snake, all shall return to the center? Could this imply that China, once the dominant power in the world, is poised to reclaim its central role on the global stage? For centuries, China considered itself the Middle Kingdom, the center of the world. Perhaps Hango foresaw a return to that position of power, where China reasserts itself as the driving force of global politics and economics. Alternatively, this prophecy could speak to something even more profound. Maybe it's not about any one country. It could be about a broader societal shift, where the world moves away from the dominant narratives of the West and begins to embrace new forms of thought, spirituality, and culture. If 2025 marks this shift, we might be entering an era where the world's center of gravity isn't in any one country or ideology, but in the collective choices and actions of all people. In the next part of this story, we'll explore more about the potential implications of Hango's prophecy for the future, and how his ancient words might guide us as we navigate the uncertain waters of 2025. Will it be a year of transformation or a year of turmoil? One thing is certain: the world is on the edge of something big, and we're all part of it. As we approach the critical year of 2025, the anticipation of what could unfold grows stronger. We've already seen how Zen Master Hango Xiun's ancient prophecies lined up with pivotal moments in Chinese history. From the fall of the Ming dynasty to the rise of the Qing, each verse seemed to trace the ebb and flow of empire. But it's the final two verses, the ones that predict 2025, that really beg the question, what is Hango trying to tell us about the world that lies ahead? Let's begin by revisiting the most chilling part of Hango's prophecy, the rise of a force from the south and the return to the center. It's easy to interpret this as a literal geopolitical prediction, especially as we watch the growing influence of nations like China and India. But what if this is about more than just power politics? What if the prophecy is pointing to something deeper, something that transcends national boundaries? The force from the south could be symbolic of the growing cultural, spiritual, and societal movements that are emerging in countries from the global south. Over the last few decades, we've seen a resurgence of voices and movements that challenge the Western-centric narrative of the world. From climate activism to social justice movements, there's a shift happening, one that calls for a more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable future. But this isn't just about politics or activism. It's also about the way people are waking up to new ways of thinking, new ways of living. In many ways, we're seeing a cultural renaissance in places that were once considered peripheral to the global conversation. Could this be the rise From the south that Hango predicted, a force that doesn't just come from one country, but from the collective will of people who are demanding change on a global scale. At the same time, we can't ignore the possibility that Hango's prophecy is alluding to a more traditional interpretation that the world's power is indeed shifting back to the east. In the last few decades, China has risen as an economic powerhouse, and its influence is being felt across the globe. The Chinese government's growing assertiveness in international relations, coupled with its Belt and Road Initiative, is a clear indicator that the country is reasserting its central role on the world stage. But does this mean we're headed for a future dominated by China? Could Hango's return to the center signify a world where China once again becomes the world's dominant power, much like it was during the height of the Tang and Qing dynasties? The truth is, no one really knows for sure. But as we watch the events of the world unfold, it's hard not to feel that the prophecy might be hinting at a larger shift in global dynamics, one that could lead to a reordering of how we see the world and who holds the power to shape its future. This shift, however, may not be confined to politics or economics. There's also the possibility that Hango's prophecy speaks to a cultural or spiritual reawakening, where the world's center isn't defined by any one country, but by the collective values and beliefs of humanity. Perhaps 2025 will see a return to more universal principles, ideas like compassion, humility, and sustainability that transcend borders and ideologies. As we look at the events leading up to 2025, we can't help but see that the world is already reeling from the effects of the global pandemic, as Hango's first part of the prophecy predicted. The question is, what comes next? Will the force from the south be a political shift or a cultural one? Will we see a world that moves toward greater unity, or will the next few years be marked by more division and conflict? For many, 2025 is not just a year to watch for geopolitical developments. It's also a time to consider the larger forces at play. The pandemic has already exposed the fragility of our global systems. In the wake of that, we've seen massive disruptions to economies, supply chains, and even our daily lives. There are also growing concerns about climate change, social inequality, and the erosion of democracy in some parts of the world. All of these factors point to a world in flux, a world that's searching for answers. So what can we learn from Hango's prophecy as we move toward this uncertain future? First, we need to recognize that the world is changing rapidly. The old systems of power, culture, and influence are being questioned, and in their place, new ways of thinking and being are emerging. We can't predict what will happen in 2025, but we can take action now to influence the course of events. Whether it's through political engagement, cultural expression, or personal growth, we all have a role to play in shaping the world that comes next. But the most important lesson here is the need for awareness and preparedness. Just as the prophecies of Hango Xiun hinted at major upheavals, so too does our world seem to be on the edge of a major transformation. Whether we're facing geopolitical shifts, societal movements, or a spiritual awakening, the key is to stay alert, adapt, and remain open to the possibilities that lie ahead. Now, as we approach 2025, there's one final question we all must ask ourselves. What will we do with this moment? The choices we make today will shape the world of tomorrow. Whether we choose to be part of the change, to resist it, or to stand on the sidelines, we will all be a part of the unfolding story. In the final lines of his last prophetic poem, Hango writes, "What comes next must be asked of those who come after." This is a powerful reminder that our actions today will have a lasting impact on future generations. The world we leave behind will be the world they inherit. So let's make it a world worth inheriting, one built on compassion, understanding, and collective action. As we wrap up today's story, I want to leave you with this thought. If the world is truly shifting, then we are the ones who can help steer it in the right direction. The future may be uncertain, but it's in our hands. So what will you choose? Will you help create the future, or will you let it unfold without your input? In the comments below, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Hango's prophecy will come true? What do you think 2025 holds in store for us? And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Until then, stay aware, stay engaged, And remember, we are all part of shaping the future. As we continue our journey into the mysteries of Hango Xiun's prophecies, it's crucial to consider the implications of what comes next in the year 2025. We've seen how his predictions for past empires, the rise of the Qing dynasty, the fall of the Ming, the reigns of Emperors Kangxi and Qianlong, all seem to be written into the fabric of Chinese history. But what about the prophecy that is yet to come, the one that speaks directly to us today? The 13th prophecy of Hango speaks directly to the year 2025, with hauntingly accurate references to the year of the snake. What makes this prophecy even more disturbing is how it ties into a time of global upheaval, the very thing we've already witnessed with the devastating effects of the pandemic. But what does it mean when Hango writes, "The West shall again witness the rise of one from the South"? Could this be a cryptic reference to the global power dynamics that are shifting as we speak? The idea of a force rising from the South could be interpreted in a number of ways. Some believe it hints at a geopolitical shift, one where countries from the global South, previously overlooked in the global conversation, begin to assert their influence. We've already seen signs of this with nations like China and India, whose economic growth and political power are reshaping the global landscape. But could this be more than just politics? Could this be a cultural revolution too? Think about it. For centuries, the world has been dominated by Western ideals, from capitalism to democracy to technology and entertainment. But in recent years, we've seen a rising tide of resistance against these ideals. People are calling for change, demanding new ways of thinking and being, the rise of social movements, environmental activism, and a more vocal push for equality. All of these could be the forces from the South that Hango spoke of. Whether it's the burgeoning global influence of Africa, Latin America, or Southeast Asia, these regions are beginning to redefine what it means to be powerful in the 21st century. The prophecy, then, might not be pointing to a single nation, but to a collective shift in power, one that is slowly but surely changing the course of history. If we consider this possibility, then the year of the snake, 2025, could be the year that these new forces reach their apex. Just as the snake is a symbol of transformation and renewal, perhaps this year will bring a profound change in the way we view power, culture, and influence. It might not be a sudden, cataclysmic event, but rather a gradual shift, a realization that the old order is no longer as stable as we once thought. But let's not get too comfortable just yet. Because while Hango's prophecy hints at a rise from the South, it also warns of something darker, a return to the center. And this part of the prophecy could carry several interpretations. In one sense, it could be seen as a warning that, after the rise of new powers, we may return to a centralizing force, where global influence once again falls under the sway of one dominant power. Could this be China's moment to reclaim its role as the dominant force in the world? The prophecy's repeated references to the center could point to China's long-held belief in its position as the Middle Kingdom, the hub of civilization. But, again, the return to the center doesn't have to be literal. It could also be a philosophical or spiritual shift. Perhaps it suggests that after the turbulence of the past century, after the rise and fall of empires, the boom and bust of economies, humanity will come to realize that true power lies not in dominating others, but in returning to the core values that bind us all together. In this sense, the center could symbolize unity, harmony, and a more collective approach to our shared future. And yet, another possibility looms large. Could Hango have been foreshadowing a darker, more dangerous time, a period of conflict or even war, where the center represents a world order that forces nations into a single, unyielding mold? After all, history has shown that when global powers are in flux, wars often follow. If 2025 sees the rise of new geopolitical forces, it could also spark tensions between old and new powers, potentially leading to a new era of conflict. The bottom line is this. The prophecy is open to interpretation, but the clues are all around us. Whether it's the rise of the global South, the reassertion of China's power, or a more spiritual return to universal principles, the events of 2025 seem to be a critical turning point in human history. It may not be the end of the world as we know it, but it could be the beginning of something entirely new. What we do know for sure is that 2025 will be a year of great change. The world is already reeling from the effects of the pandemic, and as we rebuild, we may find ourselves facing new challenges, new opportunities, and new ways of thinking. It's easy to get caught up in the uncertainty of the future, but if history has taught us anything, it's that we are the ones who shape that. So as we look ahead to the year 2025, let's remember that we have the power to influence the world around us. Whether we're advocating for change, embracing new technologies, or simply living our lives with intention, every action counts. If Hango's prophecy holds any truth, it's that we are entering a time of transformation, one that will shape the next chapter in human history. We may not know exactly what 2025 holds, but we can prepare for it. We can choose to be active participants in shaping the future, or we can watch as it unfolds before us. The choice is ours. As we close this chapter of the story, I encourage you to think about what role you want to play in the future. Will you be a catalyst for change, or will you stand by and let events happen to you? In the end, Hango's prophecy is more than just a glimpse into the future. It's a reminder that we are all connected, that the choices we make today will reverberate through time, influencing the world for generations to come. The center may be shifting, but the question is, what kind of world will we create at the heart of it? As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think will happen in 2025? Do you believe Hango's prophecy will come true? Share your reflections in the comments below. And don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're just getting started. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and remember, the future is in our hands.